How does one balance the urgent demand for economic responsibility with the need for economic growth? Built in 1953, the Trans Mountain Pipeline is a critical component of energy infrastructure within Canada. In a world where addressing climate change is more crucial than ever, how do we balance these conflicting demands?
Let's start by identifying the key players in this debate. On one side, we have proponents like the Trans Mountain Corporation, oil companies, and export refineries who view the pipeline as a vital economic driver. Indigenous advisory committees have been engaged to ensure oversight, but some Indigenous groups remain strongly opposed. Opponents include environmental organizations like Environmental Defense, which argue the pipeline increases carbon emissions and risk oil spills, and human rights groups like Amnesty International, concerned about Indigenous rights.
Trans Mountain Pipeline debate asks Canada, would immediate economic gains outweigh environmental sustainability and Indigenous rights? This pipeline is pivotal for Canada's energy future. Supporters argue it will boost economic growth, create jobs, increase GDP, enhance energy security, and enable exporting an additional 590,000 barrels of oil daily to Asian markets. Critics warn of its risks like oil spills, increased carbon emissions, and threats to Indigenous sovereignty. Environmental groups contend it contradicts Canada's climate goals and causes irreversible ecological damage. Ultimately, Canada faces a crucial challenge balancing economic growth with environmental integrity and Indigenous rights. The outcome will define not just our energy future, but our global legacy.
At this point in this video, we're going to break down the evidence used in the Trans Mountain Pipeline debate using Linda Dreyer's 6 aspects of good evidence. To support the claims mentioned, we need to look at accuracy first. The economic impacts of the pipeline, like job creation and oil export volumes, such as 590,000 additional barrels of oil per day, can be independently verified through government or industry reports. Data from sources like the Canada Energy Regulator or consulting firms back up these claims. On the environmental side, risks like oil spills and carbon emissions are recorded by scientific publications and environmental organizations. But the accuracy of these claims depend on models and hypotheses, like predicting the frequency of spills or the long-term effects of climate change. For instance, phrases like irreversible deadlock to the ecology may be overly dramatic and not necessarily backed up by professional consensus, as environmental scientists may have differing views on the extent of the pipeline's environmental impact. Now I would like to talk about precision. Statements like 590,000 additional barrels per day are specific, but they lack context. For example, how sustainable is this export growth? What happens if the global market fluctuates? While the economic data is precise, it often doesn't address the full picture, including costs like market instability or environmental damage. Similarly, environmental claims like risks of oil spills are specific, but they lack precision in terms of frequency, severity, or long-term impacts on climate change. And when critics say the pipeline causes irreversible ecological harm, it's important to note that this phrase refers to the worst-case scenarios, not precise precisions. Now let's look at sufficiency. When it comes to sufficiency, critics argue that economic data supporting short-term benefits like job creation is insufficient when considering the pipeline's long-term social, environmental, and financial impacts. The effects of oil production and transportation, including climate change implications, are often left out of the economic justifications. On the environmental side, while there's enough information to highlight concerns, critics sometimes exaggerate catastrophic outcomes, which weakens their argument. Additionally, the evidence on Indigenous rights is insufficient because it doesn't reflect the full spectrum of Indigenous opinions. While many communities oppose the pipeline, some do support it for economic reasons. The evidence should consider both sides. Now moving on to representativeness. The economic evidence often reflects the interest of oil-producing provinces like Alberta and other industry stakeholders who stand to benefit from the project. However, the broader national impact, especially the social and environmental costs to coastal regions or tourist areas, is often overlooked. Last but not least, I would now like to discuss authority. When it comes to authority, the economic evidence typically comes from qualified government agencies, economists, and industry experts who are well equipped to assess market dynamics and job creation. However, economic motivations might influence their conclusions, so it's important to cross-check this data with independent sources. Indigenous communities, with their legal and historical knowledge, have strong authority when it comes to land rights and sovereignty. However, pipeline supporters may question the authority of Indigenous leaders who accept the project in exchange for economic benefits. Addressing technological advancements in pipeline safety, such as spill response and leak detection, can also mitigate some environmental risks, offering a more balanced view of the project.
I will talk from two parts: corporate and environmental ethics and stakeholders. So the first one, the Trans Mountain Corporation emphasizes its code of business conduct and ethics. The stresses compliance with environmental regulations, operational integrity, and the safety of their operations. This is a part of their commitment to responsible environmental management. Environmental groups like Environmental Defense argue otherwise. They see the pipeline as an ethical failure, a project that threatens ecosystem, increase carbon emissions, and undermine Canada's climate commitment. Environmental ethics demand more than compliance. They require proactive action to reduce fossil fuel dependency and protect ecological balance. So for the stakeholder, they bring us corporate and governmental stakeholders who prioritize economic growth. They highlight the jobs, the GDP growth, and the boost in energy exports that the pipeline could bring.
The debate over the Trans Mountain Pipeline is fueled by powerful techniques of persuasion. Environmental groups use negative evidence to highlight what's missing from the proponent's case, like the lack of a comprehensive oil spill mitigation plan or alignment with Canada's climate goals. By emphasizing these gaps, they weaken claims of economic benefit and underscore the potential for environmental harm. While the pipeline is touted as critical for economic growth and energy security, critics propose alternatives such as investing in renewable energy. They argue these options can deliver similar benefits with less environmental risk and reduce dependence on fossil fuels.